On this episode of Three Cups and a Dash of Spirituality, we're going back to the Sallie House with Isabeau Maxwell, owner of the Sage Method. We get to hear her perspective of what happened and how things unfolded. So tune in and let's cue the music. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Three Cups and a Dash of Spirituality podcast. I'm Stacy, and I'm here with Michelle.
Hey, everyone. How are you today?
And Carissa.
Hello, guys.
And we have special guest today, Beau with the Sage Method. Hi, Beau.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We're so excited that you're here. We're actually coming back with another episode on the Sallie House because we wanted to hear Beau's story and kind of just what happened when you were there. And I'm going to be interrupting obnoxiously and asking questions throughout it. So I want to hear your experience, Beau.
Well, again, thank you for having me. I am a huge fan of this podcast. I don't think it could be a better setup of energies of the three of you. It's just incredible. So but the Sallie House was so wonderful. I was in a position to be invited and come along. So my experience and perspective is kind of, a support person type journey that I went on. I was really excited. It was also drivable. So I was like, I'm totally going to drive.
So being the support person perspective, does that shift things a little bit for you?
Not necessarily, just in the sense that it was a great question though. Yeah, in the sense that I don't have to take, just tell me where to show up and be is a wonderful thing. That's always a great thing. But energetically, now that you ask that question, fabulous question. Yeah, it does. Because I went with the intent not to fix anything or repair anything. I went with the intent to support those who were doing that, which is kind of a different feel and a wonderful one, actually. So I got to say 1 out of 10. This trip was a 10 for me. I absolutely loved it. So yeah, they invited me to come along, and I could feel that Bonnie was really anchored into this. Michelle was also very much called, which makes sense as everyone's listening to these stories unfold. It completely makes sense. So I just wanted to be there to support. But it was a doozy. And for some people in the group, this was their first quote haunted house. And I kind of came with a little bit of that mama energy of like, okay, well, I've been in many. And so I can be there to like, what do you need? Support kind of thing. And I'm really glad I went because, whoa, did they pick a doozy? Bonnie picked a doozy, like the first one. I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. And then I remember getting into the house when we first finally walked into the house. And I thought, wow, we are in it. This is a big one. This is not a small one. So way to go. We're starting off big. I love it. And it was really intense. I didn't experience anything on the way there beforehand, like weeks beforehand, again, because I think I was more in a support position. But I did experience something on the way there, on the drive there. Out of the blue, a woman in spirit form came into the front of my windshield, literally in the middle of Kansas, some back road. There was no one around for miles. And she popped into my car and said, you need to help him. And I knew it was a young kid, male. And then she pretty much left. I got to the location. We went on a whole bunch of adventures. We had electronic issues and all this type of stuff. The car alarm went off. It was inside for the seatbelt. That was fun. The most striking thing for me of what I experienced there was this was the first time that I had been physically moved. Like when I got to the top of the stairs, I went up to the top of the stairs. I got to about 2 steps to the top. And I was pushed. My knees buckled. Something came from behind and pushed on the back of my legs. And I just went right down to the ground. Didn't get hurt or anything. Just thought, well, that's interesting.
This is real. This is
real.
Right?
This is real.
I have a question before. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I want to give a little bit of your background because you've been doing clearings for a really long time, correct?
Yeah. I think my first clearing is going to fall somewhere around 2007, 2008.
And I know that this was, you stepped into this from kind of a support position. And again, I apologize for cutting you off, but I just want to make sure that the listeners know that you have a ton of experience stepping into not just haunted spaces, but clearing them out, experiencing different things. And so you kind of raised another question that I popped in my head when you were talking. When you were pushed, did you by any chance step into any fear that you have let go over times? Was it a revisit of anything that had come up for you?
Not during the push. During the push, it felt very normal in a situation like that we were in. I'm trying to think of just a quick analogy. Going into haunted houses, locations like this, at first can be like, somebody without kids going into the middle of a playground of 120, 5-year-olds.
And pushing around, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So once you get used to going into these places, you kind of expect a little bit of that and you know what that is. So there wasn't any like shock or fear around it. It was more like, that's interesting. That was an interesting approach to that one, so the kid in the analogy throws the ball at my face, it hits me in the face, and I go, well, that was an interesting throw. Good job. Because I have so much history and I'm so used to being in that type of a space. Which is also very helpful for this one because the Sallie House was a very emotionally charged house for some of us. And I witnessed my own emotions go off the charts as well. But as far as the push at the top of the stairs, that was more like, good job. You got me. That was a good one.
What does it look like when you feel like your emotions are kind of starting to be influenced by, I'm going to say spiritual activity?
Years ago, it would look like unrecognized paranoia. It would look like paranoia or fear or sadness that you think is your own, or you also feel like that's supposed to happen.
Okay.
And it's a really bizarre thing to experience when you get into something that intense. Having been in a house with that level of emotional, paranormal kind of energy, having been in houses like that multiple times, I'm not even going to say 100 times, like just multiple times, I was able to recognize when it was being pulled up. So at this point in the game, I am grateful for the inner work that I've done to be able to look at it and go, okay, those are old emotions coming up, old belief structures of mine that no longer serve me or exist, but yet I'm starting to feel them. And it's like something that is constantly, your emotions are constantly slipping away from you and you can't grab onto them and control them, if that makes sense.
I guess one of the other things that I was kind of really drawn to that you said is when you were walking through this house, it felt like there were hundreds of spirits. Now, we have all trained with you, because that's how we're sage practitioners, is because we worked with you for a really long time. And one of the things that you have discussed quite often is this idea of a human zoo. Can you speak to that a little bit and explain what that is and why it's really not cool?
Absolutely. And I'm going to do so and try to do so without any anger behind it. But I still have not been able to quite let go of that. The human zoo concept, I woke up to that. I'm trying to think, it was I think the summer of 2011. Is the first time that I really came across that. And it was in an asylum in New York that I went and cleared. The concept of the human zoo is living individuals who have property of some sort that is quote unquote haunted, and they are profiting by selling tickets for people to come and experience that haunting. The human zoo piece comes when that living person who owns that property and is making money off of that experience is also working actively to contain the spirits in that location, not let them cross over and not let them go home.
So essentially keeping humans trapped in a space for entertainment purposes, essentially keeping Aunt Mildred where she is, just so people can look at her.
Yeah, so they can feel what it's like to be around Aunt Mildred, who's now in spirit form. And I will say, I always say this pretty quickly when we talk about this stuff, because, you don't want to offend, but most of these owners of these properties, people selling tickets, trying to make some money off of this, most of them don't put two and two together that these quote ghosts are actually people. and they don't think through that piece of it. But yeah, they'll decorate rooms. We saw a little bit of it in the Sallie House. They decorate the room. They put in a bunch of kids' toys in certain rooms. The asylum had like an old living room from the 1950s built for the older folks. And even that owner point blank gave us a tour in the beginning back in 2011 and said, we have a medium on staff whose job it is to keep the spirits here. And the Sallie House had verbiage upon sign up from what Bonnie was telling us is that you can't clear the property, which is really a statement of a human zoo.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting too, because even if you shift out of perspectives, you don't have to go into a place like the Sallie House and clear it necessarily, because it's going to constantly have that like kind of door, revolving door. That's what I was looking for. I'm making the motion, hoping that my brain will catch up with me. That revolving door of spirits that's going to be coming through, because they're drawn to that energy regardless of if they're the original spirits in the house, but they're going to go in and they're going to make themselves known, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
back to your experience, you got pushed up the stairs. Talk to us a little bit after that. And I'm going to shush.
No, please ask questions. Please. After that, we went through a bunch of different equipment, things like this. It was really interesting to be in this space with all the practitioners and myself, because I don't know, this is the first time I've done like a haunted house situation or a haunted location like this, with not necessarily like an established ghost team that's not interested in mediumship or not interested in spirituality, but they're just interested in evidence. So it was really neat to be with a group of compassionate women, actually, who were there to help, along with being interested as well. We explored the house a little bit. There was one point in the house where, we laughed. We had a really great time because there was some moments that were entertaining. You come around a corner that is literally spooky in your human brain. And then we all kind of got riled up there, and that was a good time. I think Carissa like grabbed a Swiffer at some point.
I was going to say, didn't Carissa brandish a Swiffer or something at people or something along those lines? Because I do remember that.
That was her weapon, and I was like, yes. I'm in for this all day long. This is so much fun. But there was one point too where we came to another area in the house, and there was a chalkboard, and there was a bunch of names written on the chalkboard, and the name Beau was written up like, and actually how I spell it too, Beau instead of Bo. And it was written on the chalkboard. And I remember thinking, okay, well, that makes me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But, and then at the end of the evening, I got to be witness to absolute powerful, beautiful, compassionate connection, especially through Bonnie and her just being present in the home. That was a really neat thing to be able to be, again, the support structure on.
Can you speak to that a little bit? What did that feel like, and how did things unfold?
So it was getting to the end of the night, and I'm not a young spring chicken anymore. So I was like, getting tired. Right. But typically haunted locations, this was also an interesting piece in it for me. Typically haunted locations don't really start even kicking off until 2-3 in the morning, because that really is, the hour. And doesn't matter where you are, what time zone you're in, that's the hour, mostly in my theory, because that's the quietest that the living people are. And so I was looking forward to that, but it wasn't even midnight yet, I don't think. I think it was like just before midnight. Yeah. And we were sitting at a table. Michelle was to my left, Carissa was to my right, and Bonnie was right across from me. And it was more that we were just still staying in a space of curiosity, trying to get information, trying to communicate. And a guide of sorts showed up behind Bonnie, and I could start to see them come into form. And then all of a sudden it went from I shouldn't say just a guide, because all of our guides are really important, but it went from a guide to, oh, this is a bigger situation than a typical guide. So this is more like an earth keeper, and an earth keeper, which Stacey, I've heard you talk about on here as well. An earth keeper is an individual who has committed before passing, before death, they've committed to remain in the in-between to support the structure of the land and the people in a certain area. And so this earth keeper showed up, and I remember just looking at Bonnie going, okay, there's an earth keeper behind you, and they're with you. Like they're connected with you. And I got to be witness to a very beautiful connection between Bonnie and the earth keeper, and just a vibration raising. And it's like, the way that I could explain it to somebody is that the entire world falls away and you see purpose unfolding in front of you, in the most beautiful way, energetically. And so she was able to, and I can't speak to it very much. I'm really excited for listeners to listen to Bonnie's perspective on this too. But she got to connect with the earth keeper and process through how to balance that land, how to and also balance that house for future potential use of that house in the highest good of all, instead of the highest good of people that are necessarily profiting off of it, is, I guess, how I would say it.
So what I'm hearing is that you guys really didn't have a hand in any of that. It was just kind of a natural progression of the way things go. Because I know my experience with earth keepers is that they show up where they show up when they show up, period. That's not a you thing. That's not any invitation thing. That's not, we have no, and I'm going to use the word control over when and where they show up. I know in my experience, seeing them at a park, they step in and they do what they're going to do. So it sounds like it unfolded in a glorious way. Did anything happen after you had left the Sallie House?
After I left? Oh, yes. And I also want to say that I want to kind of jump on what you just said, Stacey, because you couldn't have said it better. It really is. They show up and all of a sudden, for me at least, I don't know about you, but I always feel like when an earth keeper shows up, or like a being that controls like a battery or something like that, I always kind of instantly feel like I'm 10 years old and the teacher just walked in the room. Is that what it kind of feels like for you?
So when I've experienced them, I wasn't even trying to do anything. I was just kind of observing the energy of it was a very heavily wooded area that has actually had a lot of UFO and alien like sightings around where I am. And it was more like they stepped out and they just looked at me like, we are here. And I was like, wasn't gonna have that. Like, you're there. I'm beautiful. Thank you for your service, essentially, and what you're doing. I'm gonna stay away. And like go back to my corner. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I'm gonna be over here. If you need anything, you're not gonna, because you're an earth keeper. So I'm just gonna be over here, and I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is that, so that's my experience with earth keepers. I've never had like a connection with an earth keeper like I witnessed Bonnie have. So that was I'm so grateful to have that moment, to be like, seriously cool. So, because we're all different. All of us are different. And somebody might connect with earth keepers all the time. Somebody might never connect with an earth keeper. It's all so different in the spiritual realms. But yeah, when we were done, it was really amazing that all process went through. And I'll let Bonnie speak to that, because like I said, she was the one that had that beautiful connection. But I do remember Carissa saying before we ever went that her guides mentioned, we're not going to clear this place. And I was like, this is cool. This is interesting. I want to see how this unfolds. And, while we stay curious and we stay interested, we're also human. So the human part of me was like, well, it kind of doesn't make sense, because that's what you do. You go to these places and you clear them. Like 1 + 1 is 2, said Thickhead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when we were all done with the with what happened with Bonnie and the earth keeper and everything else, and I'm like, well, that was all handled. We didn't technically clear it.
Well, and I'm going to throw out there and say handled for now, because that energy is going to be back, and it's going to continue to be popping there because of the what it's created for, right? They're not going to lose anything.
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly. So in essence, what you have when you have a location that a person has owned or that owns or purchased and is selling tickets, you don't have to hold spirits to make that place effective.
Nope.
Trust in the fact that there are a huge number of individuals who are stuck in the in between who fabulously want to negatively affect people, and they will be energetically drawn to that house one after another after another. I mean, to the point where if you were to go into a haunted location and clear it, you're in essence taking down the walls that the
Mhm.
living person put up to try to hold them in this human zoo. Taking down those walls, there's two things that happen. The first one would be that those people get to go home, thank goodness. But the second one is there's no walls. So these
Right.
living people that are holding this human zoo together are also limiting the experiences that their profitable business can even have,
Yeah.
because they're limiting who can also come in.
Right. And that's kind of a very interesting perspective. And you actually just raised another good point that I was thinking of, is that not only are they not going to lose out, but they do bring in different opportunities for different, I'm going to say, levels of spirits. But speaking to just stuck souls in general and that crossing over piece, one of the important things to note is generally when people are stuck on this side and they're needing help crossing over, they're generally in a lower vibration anyways,
Yeah.
because that's what keeps them here, is they can't release that human aspect to vibrate higher to cross over. So you could just have a door that's just bringing them in and just constantly moving around. So
Yes.
yeah.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
you were going to speak to what happened after too. You said something happened after you left the Sallie House.
Oh yeah, the two things that I found really cool afterwards was like I said, I was sitting right next to Carissa, and I remember Chris and I both going, "Do you feel the house? It feels like lovely." Like after, Bonnie worked with the Earth Keeper and everything, and I guess you could say walls came down and now open for all activity, whatever, however you want to phrase that. Um because again, we didn't do anything exactly like Carissa's guides had said was going to happen. And yet now we're sitting in this space and it absolutely felt wonderful. The heavy, emotional, dark soup, it just was gone. And it felt like I was hanging out at a friend's house at like 1 PM. So there's a really dramatic shift energetically, and you can feel it. Everyone can feel it. You also have to remember that in that house, we're also walking through the soup of everyone who was living, who came there to have a fear-based moment and then left that fear-based energy there. So now you get to go into that property as well and feel that in addition. But then I was driving home, and it was a long enough drive that I had to stay the night halfway back to my house. And I stayed in a hotel in Garden City. And I went to bed. I woke up. I was awoken. I woke up at 2:22 in the morning, of course, and with what I thought was a tornado happening outside. And it was loud enough to wake me up, which is pretty impressive for me because I'm a very heavy sleeper. I woke up, I remember sitting up, and I remember thinking, I'm on the top floor. I need to figure out what I need to do. I need to get down. I was raised in Minnesota. I know the sound, you know what I mean? Like this is really intense. I looked over at the clock and it was 2:22, and I went, all right, I'm gonna just give myself a second to see if maybe this is just a spiritual thing. And checked in with my guide. He was like, "You're completely fine." I said, "Okay, thanks." And then I went back to bed. And it was afterwards that I talked to Michelle that Garden City was actually connected to the whole lineage of who was in that house and who was affecting it, and their history, and I believe a court case. And so I literally went through the town where everything kind of resolved itself back in the day, connected to this whole process, and then had this huge wind kick up. So I thought that was really interesting. I woke up, everything was fine, and I did look at the weather history. I'm like, there was just this one spike at like 2:22 in the morning.
That's actually really cool though, because that almost like it's like your trip was kind of bookended, right? So initially, before you even got to the house, you were experiencing things in the car. You said the alarm was going off and stuff like that, and then at the end, when you were on your way home, it's like, okay, it's over.
Yeah.
Here's this like random storm that's going to kick up and just kind of present to you in a way that lets you know, like, okay, we're good. You're good. The experience is over. How cool. How very cool.
Yeah, and for me, that's happened numerous times in the past as well. The really strong winds in the middle of the night after an intense clearing. It's probably happened 5-6 times over the years, especially when the clearing has to do with land, especially when the clearing has to do with how that particular clearing affects everyone moving forward.
I love that. Carissa, Michelle, any questions or comments or anything you want to add?
First of all, I want to say thank you, Beau, for being our support. You are so full of love, and you've had these experiences in the past that I felt really safe going into the home with you. So thank you so much for joining us. Another point I'd love to touch on is Bonnie and the fact that throughout the whole experience, and she's going to get to share her side of the story, but it was connected to her. It was all connected to her because she was so anchored in. And I remember you sitting there and you're like, this message is for her across the table. And then it just kept building around that. So I thought that was really cool. And I really feel like all four of us needed to be there to get the full experience of what was going on in that house and be able to put the pieces together. And in the next episode, I'm going to tie back your win story too to this whole person who was in the house. So I'm excited to do that.
And it was nice having them there. When I had the Swiffer, Beau was like, well, let me just go and check it out. And I think I climbed over Bonnie. Bonnie. So it was fun, even though it was positive and, again, compassionate and everything. We had an adventure and it was fun. And it's not just some detective like, I want to show you what the ghost is like. And we're coming in there to validate, to listen, to experience, and have fun. It was fun.
I love
And
that.
and I would also I'm going to add to that too. It was like 4 compassionate, loving, and very open and highly intuitive women.
Swiffer branding, intuitive women.
Swiffer branding, intuitive women. Yeah. Well, to be fair, the area that Chris was going into, I mean, you could have written a horror movie on going into that area. Do you know what I mean? It was really clear that it was like, because I think the 4 of us were in the front, standing in front of it going, who's going in? Because it was that you still have the human stuff. It doesn't matter how many times you do this. You still have the human stuff. So Chris is like, I'll go. And then Bonnie, and the next thing you know, Chris is swinging a Swiffer and climbing over Bonnie. And I'm like pushing through going, I got it. We got it. It was really fun. We did really have a good moment there. It was.
And that does remind me that for the rest of the night, Carissa just kept saying, you go downstairs and get it, Michelle. Like, I forgot this. You go get it, Michelle. I'm like, I'm not walking down there by myself. Are you kidding me?
And one thing that I got over my fear through the SAGE method program, the year-long training. And so it was just so interesting to actually, it's like, well, what am I afraid of? But you're in it, it's dark, you're tired. And then, is there any humans going to come around? That was
whatever was going to come up would obviously have been taken care of with a Swiffer. You would have conquered it. With
definitely would have been taken care of. Yeah, human, even if it was a human, right? That Swiffer, taking them out.
I know what I'm getting you for Christmas this year. You're going to get all of the Swiffer things in life just so you're protected no matter where you are.
Oh my God.
I wasn't even there and I think it's the greatest thing.
It was really fun. And exactly what Carissa just said, it doesn't really matter how far down the path you go. You would have to be completely mentally detached to not have a lifetime of pop culture movies, all that kind of stuff, and step into something like that and be like, I'm not scared. There are moments where, and actually, Chris, this was another really great point. You do have to think about the living people too. I'm more scared of the living people than I am the dead. So yeah, and you don't know if someone's in that area or not. And so you do have to be kind of, and everyone's like, oh, Beau busted on through. I was scared too. There was only one Swiffer. I didn't have another choice to pick. So it just,
All right. The one and only weapon.
For future clearing or for future experiences, we all need to bring our own Swiffers, carry on through the plains or wherever we're going. We're just going to hightail it with our Swiffers. Got it.
Because Carissa, halfway through the night, brought up a really great point that, if she knew that there was a haunted house near her college, as a college student, she'd go mess with the people who were inside of it, like tap on the window or do something like that. And so, yeah, we were prepared. We had a Swiffer, maybe a broom. There might have been a broom there too.
Oh, right. Wouldn't y'all have done that in college? Maybe not. Maybe
No.
Well, and there's a lot of different scenarios. I've been on a clearing before where the homeowner brought a bunch of friends in the middle of the clearing in the middle of the night. And then they all kind of spread out, and there was like 8 of them, and there was only 4 of us. And so we ended up having to go collect all of the equipment to leave. And one of the people, one of the team members and myself, went downstairs, and there was some dude that had gone down, living guy, gone down there and just was sitting there just staring at us. And I'm like,
no.
You got to have the human safety too.
Yeah.
And
so
it's
I
good
will
to keep
say,
them at a distance. Good.
To answer your question, Carissa, I absolutely would not have, because I was too terrified to get in trouble. Like I was that kid that I wouldn't do those things, not because I was worried about getting in trouble with the police. I was more worried about getting in trouble with my parents.
Wow.
Yeah. So I would not have. Now, maybe.
You have a valid point, though, because 3 homes down, it was a frat house. They had the hammock in front. And when I walked by the next day, there were all these college guys there. I'm like, perfect opportunity. So she wasn't off base.
No.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
The only
it was a good theory.
Kid.
Yeah, it was a great
rebellious kid here.
Yep.
Anything else that we want to chat about at all? Any other last thoughts? No? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for jumping on our podcast with us and sharing your experience. It is such an honor to have you here.
And before we close out, Beau, would you like to tell our listeners where they can find you and your program?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, the sagemethod.com website is where I keep everything. It's all in one area. It's where you can also find all these beautiful practitioners right here too.
And
so the Sage Method, THESAGE method.com.
Yeah, we'll definitely link it. And I guess with that, I'm going to say stay classy.
Stay sassy.
Stay badassy. Until next week, everyone.
Bye, guys.